Welcome to the Practical NLP podcast with me, Andy Smith. And our guest today is international NLP trainer Jonathan Altfeld, who I've known for a very long time. I believe I met Jonathan around about 1997, something like that. He did a couple of gigs for the Richmond NLP group, which I used to run. I attended a couple of his specialist seminars, and he taught on one of my very first master practitioner course, actually, back in 2004, when I didn't feel confident in teaching the modeling bit myself. We've been friends ever since. Jonathan's been kind of a mentor to me in some ways on certain technical aspects of NLP. He's one of the smartest guys in NLP, and he's one of the people making genuine innovations and contributions in the field. So here he is, Jonathan Altfeld. Welcome.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for hosting me. And also, I'm blushing a little bit from that introduction. Wow.
Well, that's fine. It's audio only, so we'll get away with that. Yeah. So,
can I first start by
yes.
saying how impressed I am with your podcast? I think it's absolutely fabulous what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
You've covered so many wonderful subjects and interviewing some great folks. And your podcast interview of James Tsoukalos was fabulous. And I just think you're really contributing something profoundly valuable to the field.
Well, that's good to know. That's pretty much the occasional feedback I get from the listeners as well, that people use it sometimes to. I had somebody saying they use it to train members of their call center sales team and so on. So it's good to know it is making a difference for people. Can I ask, Jonathan, where are you in the world at the moment?
I'm currently in Florida. This is actually where I used to live when you and I first met many, many eons ago. And I took 6.5 years to live in exile up in Pennsylvania. I moved back here at the end of 2014. So I'm just northeast of Tampa.
So for our listeners and for me as well, actually, one of the first questions I ask generally of my guests is, how did you get into NLP in the first place? Because I think you got in round about the same time I did, maybe a year or two earlier. So I would love to know how you discovered NLP, how you got into it.
Certainly. Let's see. To really answer the question, I have to go back a little further, I guess, to explain why and how NLP was valuable to me at the time at which I got exposed to it. My formal education was in architecture, believe it or not, which is always a blend of art and science. I spent 2 years at Cornell Architecture School. And then I transferred out of that for philosophical reasons. I didn't happen to agree with that particular architecture school's philosophy. And I moved back to my original intention, which was to get a liberal arts degree, and I transferred to another school. And at that other school, I studied computer science and English and philosophy. So all of those have components that now reflect and fluoresce in my NLP career. And here's how and why I think that's true. My background was in computer science and AI, which is largely about listening for the logic behind natural language. So inevitably...
Okay, sorry, can I just stop you there for a moment? Just for the benefit of my listeners, anyone who has come into the podcast because they know me through teaching appreciative inquiry, that's not the AI we're talking about, is it? You're talking about artificial intelligence?
That's quite correct, and I appreciate the distinction. Thanks for that. So yes, so artificial intelligence and computer science. I was mostly involved in decision systems, intelligent decision systems, not learning systems. That was not my expertise. So all of that side of AI, or the AI that I was trained in, is about listening for the logic behind natural language. And what that means to me is listening for the deep structure behind the surface structure of language. And that should sound very familiar to NLPers. Mm-hmm. As for my love of English and literature, English is about the linguistic representation of art in one respect anyway, the art of language. And so combine computer science with English, and now we've got the structure of artistic expression. And then I also had a background in philosophy, which is about ethics and values and how we understand our world and each other and how we make sense from complexity. So I think I was primed without knowing how or why through my collegiate education for NLP when I finally got exposed to it. So then I fast forward about 7 years after a career in artificial intelligence. I was taking a break from that career. I had been published in an awards conference. I had an illustrious career as a consultant in artificial intelligence, building decision systems that were in place, largely in the financial sector. And I was looking for something during this break I was taking to help me become a better knowledge engineer. I was originally expecting to stay in the artificial intelligence field. And when I got exposed to NLP, that took me in a completely different direction. It was like another calling had arrived, and I started sponging it up, and that became inevitable, I think, for me. So that's how I got into NLP.
Okay. And what sort of time, what sort of year was that?
That was 1996 and 1997. I think you're pretty close to your comment that we met in 97. I think we may have met either in very late 97 or possibly in early 98. So I spent about a year just sponging and absorbing NLP, and I think there were a lot of pieces there that were already true for me, already understood at a deep level. I mean, this idea of listening for deep structure underneath surface structure, and this idea of building maps of how people think, that was already something I was trained in, although through another discipline. So there were a lot of pieces of NLP that I didn't need to learn from scratch the way a lot of folks do. And so 1996, 1997 was a whirlwind period for me.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So from my AI perspective, appreciative inquiry perspective, one of the questions that I normally ask people is, what's been one of your best experiences of NLP?
Oh, I've got so many weird things to choose from. Do I pick from the time when I embarrassedly discovered that training lie detection skills also trains lying skills? From the time, and oh boy, I was red in the cheeks when I realized what had happened. Do I pick from the time, because those are learning experiences, right? Those are fabulous. Do I pick the time when I used to do those linguistic wizardry courses? You've been to a few, I think.
Yeah, I've been to at least one, yeah.
And there have been some absolutely magical moments in those when we do what I call the village council exercises. That was an extraordinary experience. But probably as I'm thinking back, the most powerful, positive, best experience that I can think of was that my practitioner training, the first one I attended in 1997, was with the amazing Rex Sykes.
Uh-huh.
Rex was a profound influence on how I think about training and how I became better at NLP. I'd spent months and months and months learning NLP on my own, actively and aggressively, almost compulsively, creating experiences, learning experiences every night, every day for myself. And 3 days in Rex's course out of 14, we were doing 14-day practitioner trainings then. 3 days in his course exceeded 6 months of learning on my own, and that was profound. So in 1997, I attended training with an extraordinary trainer who brought everyone in the room to extraordinary levels of greater skill and depth and knowledge. And I thought, that's worth modeling. That's worth sharing with other people and expressing how profound it was. And then in 2011, late 2011, Rex had taken about a decade off from NLP, and I had the unbelievable privilege of working with Rex and co-training an NLP practitioner training with him. And so that was really one of the best experiences I could ever hope for, was being able to share a stage, so to speak, with a mentor and work with him, alongside him, and learn how he thinks, because I was getting these wonderful conversations, these sidebars, as everyone else was progressing. All the students were doing their thing, and we were working with them, and then we'd sidle off to the side and have these discussions that were educational on a level at which I think I've been hungry for years. That was truly a privilege.
That sounds great. And particularly since when you start out, you probably think, I could never get to that level. And then you find yourself working with the guy more or less as an equal. And they don't let you down, because I've on occasion found myself working with people who I used to look up to. And when you work with them, you find, okay, maybe they're not so hot after all. But that doesn't sound like this was the case here.
Yeah, pardon me for speaking over you. There's a lag in our conversation.
There is, yeah. We'll get used to it probably. Round about the end of the interview, we'll have got used to that.
I totally agree with you. Your perspective is right on. I have had both of those experiences, fortunately, and we don't notice our own progress day to day as a trainer. So a decade goes by of wonderful work, hopefully wonderful work, and great results and testimonials and all of that, and we don't notice our day-to-day movement. But then to be seen as an equal, to do kind of work as an equal, the evidence comes in later on, and that's wonderful. I will say this: yes, there were moments where I was doing the kind of work I would expect to see and hear from Rex, but there were also moments of me having my humility kept in check too, because having had the other experiences that you're talking about, where it's easy to let our knowledge that we may have progressed quite far, that can also run away unchecked. So there were moments where I'd be watching Rex work, thinking I knew what he was doing, and then I realized he was 10 steps ahead of me. So I had that wonderful experience too. He's gifted in a lot of ways, and so yes, we were billed as equals, and there are probably areas of skill that I have as a trainer that are unique to me. But Rex will always be an extraordinary trainer in my eyes.
Yeah, co-training is such an interesting experience because sometimes it can really work with the right person, and if both people go into it with the right attitude, the participants get a better experience than they would have got from either one of you. And then other times you could have two really great trainers who are great on their own, and together it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Can I add one more best experience?
Please, yeah.
And I suspect this sort of relationship would be something you and I would enjoy more often if we lived closer to each other. I developed a really wonderful, wonderful co-training relationship with Doug O'Brien over the years.
Oh, yeah.
He and I met probably first in 2001. It was probably 2004 before we met up again and started thinking about doing some work together between the knowledge engineering material that you know well, and sleight of mouth, of course, as well, which he's just gifted at training. I think he's probably one of the best at that.
I would agree, yeah.
So together we put together something called Belief Craft, which is the combination of knowledge engineering about belief systems and sleight of mouth for changing beliefs. The two dovetailed together so well. So that was the beginning of our partnership, was coming up with Belief Craft together, and we taught it in the UK, and we taught it in Orlando, and we made a product out of it. And he's really very much kin to me. I mean, he's kind of like a brother from another mother. He and I learned to co-train together so well, where we could sort of we'd see where each other was going and augment the work that each of us was doing on stage. Sometimes very subconsciously from the back of the room, or through nudging students along. That level of depth of co-training relationship, which I developed over a great deal of time with Doug, has been truly formative for me. And he and I have just gone in slightly different directions, in the sense that he has always been primarily focused on hypnosis, and he's just wonderful at it. He's just extraordinary at it. And so he's interested in hypnosis and hypnotic storytelling, and he's doing wonderful work there and continuing to evolve. And I moved in the direction of more business applications of NLP, and there's less overlap between our work nowadays than I think there was in the past. And that's probably more because of the shift that I've made towards more business work. So again, those are two of the probably top ongoing experiences in my career to date. So I'm grateful for both of them, and so many other things too, including you.
Yeah. I've had a slightly similar journey with hypnosis, because I used to be a hypnotherapist at one time. Right. And I've moved more and more towards business applications. So there's stuff going on in hypnosis now, which I'm out of the loop on those developments, really. Yeah. Okay. So if the you of now could say something to the you back then, just starting out in NLP, what would it have been useful for you to hear back then from what you know now? This is another kind of way of asking, what do you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
And there's not a lot
Uh-huh.
that comes to mind. My answer is probably really short on this question. I think I just wish I'd known about it earlier.
Oh yeah, I can second that, because what was I, 35, I think, when I found out about NLP?
I mean, there's a lot that I know now that I didn't know then. That I can't say. I chose some amazing trainers, so I don't have the experience that a lot of my students have shared with me, which is that they sometimes choose teachers that are not optimal for them initially, and they showed up at my course, or they've shown up at someone else's course who was wonderful for them, and then I met them later, and they'll often say, I wish I'd known who was going to be the best trainer for me initially. I didn't have that experience. I went to Rex Sykes. I went to Richard Bandler. I went to the top people. I was very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, you rolled a 6 on your first go, didn't you? So NLP is an evolving field, and people model things from other disciplines, like you've done with the decision systems to create knowledge engineering. There are new developments happening. What are you really excited about in the NLP field at the moment?
Okay. There's always something to be excited about. I love what you're doing with the Practical NLP podcast, and also with Appreciative Inquiry. I'm excited that you're doing more with business applications of NLP. Peter Freeth is continuing to do some great stuff with business. Yep. I'm excited to learn more from what I would say are the very, very few neurolinguistic programmers out there, the trainers and information providers, who are keeping the bar really high on quality and level of immersion. And this is probably one of the most important factors to me. I mean, James Tsoukalos, who you did an interview with recently, and Richard Bolstad continue to write in ways that are evidence of the quality of their thinking and the depth of their understanding of what they speak on. Jamie Smart is doing some wonderful work with his 3 principles-based clarity practitioners and more. He's doing some newer stuff now. He's found a way to achieve much wider recognition from the wider field of coaching without sacrificing quality or talent. And Eric Roby, continues to write in ways that just astound me. I mean, he just has a level of depth and understanding. I know that I'm always impressed when I read what he writes. As you know, and this is a little bit, I'm starting getting away into a more contentious area. As you know, unfortunately, many of the most famous NLPers out there have sacrificed quality and don't have as much talent as certain others. They'll go to great lengths to look good on camera and oversimplify NLP for sound bites. That's not impressive to me, and they've watered it down so much that their students are what I would call a dim shadow of what NLP is really capable of helping us achieve. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're asking me who I really admire in NLP, I'm only impressed and excited by those who keep standards high in whatever they're doing. And I don't mean standards in terms of the budget they spend on making a presentation look powerful or sound fabulous. I'm interested in results. In other words, what are these students capable of when they leave? How much retention do they keep longer range after the course is over? These are the bigger questions that matter to me. And as far as I'm concerned, any course that has more than about 25 students, 30 students maximum, will not be able to achieve the level that we can achieve with smaller classes. So again, keeping the standards high. I admire anybody who's keeping the standards high.
Yeah, and what strikes me about all the people who you've mentioned there is that they know about stuff outside of NLP as well. So I know that, Peter Freeth, for example, rethinks a lot of things almost from first principles, and kind of almost reverse engineers some of the NLP techniques, and they come out different at the end. Richard Bolstad, all of these are people who I hope to get on the podcast for future interviews. Richard really keeps up with psychological research and neuroscience. James does some very innovative stuff from not from spiral dynamics, but he's aware of it. He's not following it slavishly, for sure. And Eric has in-depth knowledge of linguistics, for example, as far as I can tell from his writing anyway. So people are learning, these people are learning stuff and aware of stuff and thinking about stuff from outside of NLP as well. They're not just staying within the boundaries of what they were taught by their trainers.
Agreed.
And I think that's where the future of the field really lies, is cross-fertilization, allied with, of course, modeling excellence, which is the heart of it.
It's interesting. I really wish there was a way to educate the public that it was more effective than it's been lately, to help students turn away from perhaps the most popular and the shorter NLP courses out there, because they're not doing anybody a service. I really wish there was a way for us to more effectively educate consumers of NLP courses before they take their most important courses, like a practitioner or a master practitioner or a trainer's training course. Those typically are the core courses most people take, or at least some of those. And if there were a way to keep people from being attracted to the most popular and the shortest NLP courses, which are, in my opinion, amongst the worst criteria for choosing such courses, I wish there were a way for us to do that more effectively.
Yeah, it's a conundrum, and market forces seem to be. James Sakalas was talking about this on the last interview about how courses seem to be getting shorter and shorter. Apart from his, which I think is still 28 days, and that's a real achievement that he's managed to keep those going.
Isn't that amazing? 28 days. That would never fly in the United States. And I know that that's a limiting belief, and maybe it would potentially with enough people in one's customer base. But the problem is multifold. Number one, there's a lot of skepticism in the U.S. For NLP. There really is.
Yeah.
In fact, in higher end coaching circles, it's become the rage for entrepreneurs who charge $10,000 a workshop to denigrate NLP in their advertising materials. I've seen it happen recently, because they think of it as being something that people use for only influence and not so ethical influence. And I would say that that's what's coming out of those short NLP courses.
Yep.
Instead of more ethical, more grounded use of NLP. So in the U.S., we've got some potential challenges to overcome with that. Additionally, let's say in Europe and the UK and Australia, true of all those places, you have more holiday time in general than people in the U.S. do. I mean, it's very common for people in Europe, UK, Australia, New Zealand, et cetera, to have between 3 to 6 weeks of vacation per year. That's considered normal. Whereas in the US, having 2 weeks is rare, and only top executives move up to 3 or 4. So people have less free time available. So now compare that with a 14-day practitioner course over 2 weeks, and people have to give up all of their annual vacation to attend such a course. It's not easy.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that, but I've always thought, I've always wondered how Americans manage on so little holiday. It's your superpower, I guess.
It's a societal meme, I guess, and it gets tougher and tougher over time to compete.
Yeah. In these interviews, I like to have something for our listeners that they can take away and play with, or have some little bit of NLP explained to them, or some little intervention or even thought experiment that they can take away and try out. So what have you got?
Okay, that's when you asked me to share something with your listeners, I was faced with a bit of a challenge, because I've got a lot of different techniques that are relatively unique to me. And I thought a technique, if I'm speaking to a wider range of people, meaning range of, let's say, NLP background and skill, what can I come up with that would be valuable for everybody, regardless of their background? And because I've got techniques that are basic and I've got techniques that are advanced. For example, some of my stuff on anchoring is nothing short of amazing to even people who've taken practitioner courses. You've seen that material trained, so you know what I'm talking about. But what I'm thinking of is, what if we can share not only the importance, but examples of 2 different styles of thinking that allow someone to have the kind of intellectual honesty and rigor that enables real art with NLP. And so what came to mind is sharing with your listeners the importance of knowing when they're using one style of thinking from another style of thinking. And the words are relatively complicated if you've never heard them before, but I'm going to unpack them and make them real and understandable. So here's what they are. If somebody's taking notes, this is what we begin with. It's the difference between inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Now, let's look at the verbs underneath these adjectives. Deductive, the root word, of course, is deduce. So to deduce something is what I call forward thinking. In other words, we begin from some knowledge, some facts, and we use those facts to deduce from there what is true. An example of deductive logic would be, for example, lots of folks have read Sherlock Holmes stories. So Sherlock Holmes stories are examples of deductive reasoning taken into an extreme. In other words, being hyper aware of these details and then deciding what that must mean without predicting anything. That's both hard to do for a lot of folks and incredibly valuable to know that you're keeping your focus on just letting the facts take you wherever they take you without prediction. It's hard to do that, but it's worthwhile. And to know when you're sticking with just deductive logic. So deductive reasoning is letting the facts take us wherever they take us. And we're non-directional in our analysis. That's pretty important. The moment we become directional, we've actually jumped to inductive. And I'm going to explain that one too, of course. So again, coming back to deductive, we are non-predictive, non-inductive. We don't lean in any direction. We don't lead in any direction. We simply let information come to us. So in coaching work or in therapy using NLP, perhaps, a lot of, let's say, less well-trained NLPers will intentionally go in a direction through a hunch, the use of a hunch. And hunches can be valuable, but early on in gathering information from our clients or our subjects, if we stick with deductive logic, deductive reasoning, we let their information drive us towards an optimal solution. And knowing that we're sticking with deductive logic and deductive reasoning is so critical. I'll explain more about why in just a moment. Let's flip the switch to inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning doesn't pay a lot of attention to all the data. It often will look at one clue and jump way ahead in thinking to a predictive expectation. They cross their arms in front of them. That must mean they're closed to new ideas, which is a joke, of course. That's in body language analysis. That's not what it means most of the time, but it can mean that potentially. So the issue with inductive reasoning is sometimes it leads us really far astray. So inductive reasoning, meaning predictive, takes us to some guess we have, and then we start working backwards from there. Now, working backwards from there is valuable. We call this backward chaining, and we can then ask the question, what would need to be true for my guess to actually be true? So inductive reasoning is to induce a result. Inductive reasoning is fabulous for choosing goals and designing pathways to get to a goal, because that is predictive. That is saying, I'd like to get to this amazing result out there that isn't yet real, isn't yet true, and I don't yet know how to get there, but I want that for me and my family and my friends and for the people I serve. And so you create this wonderful goal. And if you move towards a goal deductively, you'll probably never get there. If you choose a wonderful goal and you work backwards from it and then find a pathway back to now, you can generate a path that gets you to your amazing goal. And so path planning towards goals, goal setting and then designing pathways to it, works a charm when you use backward chaining, when you intentionally begin with inductive reasoning. And having the rigor to focus our minds in an inductive fashion is so incredibly valuable, not only for us as individuals, for our own personal and professional development, but also for coaches. And I'm getting a little long-winded here. I promise I'll tighten it up. So being able to focus our attention inductively to induce a result, and then working backwards is critical. And being able to move forwards from facts without direction deductively is also critical.
Yeah, listeners, I can tell you that that backward chaining for setting goals really does work. I learned this from Jonathan on a knowledge engineering course originally, and it's been part of my kind of goal setting repertoire and what I teach my students ever since.
Wonderful. How cool is that?
Yep.
Thank you. Great feedback. Again, the first lesson is to know what these two different thinking styles are, and then the next lesson is to commit ourselves to a greater level of personal awareness in our thinking patterns, so that we can begin to detect when we jump unexpectedly or without intention back and forth between these two different thinking styles. And by the way, being able to jump back and forth is something all of us have inside of us already. The problem is that most of us, without any training or personal rigor, most of us are too casual about it. And we don't know when it happens. By the way, the best diagnosticians do both. They have to.
Yeah.
Because if you went to a doctor who is purely deductive, they couldn't move forward until they'd done 3,000 tests on you.
Yep.
Right? If you went to an inductive doctor and said, my finger hurts, they'd say cancer.
Yeah. There are some therapists like that, I think.
I think you're absolutely right, which is why I think perhaps one of the best techniques I can share, if you ask me the question, to a varied audience is get clear and rigorous about when you're using each and for what effect. Great diagnosticians, whether they are medical or mechanics, I mean, great mechanics who can trace the odd source of a ping sound in an engine, they, just like a medical doctor, they have to be able to jump back and forth intentionally between inductive and deductive, minimizing the extra test expense to their customers. Same thing with medical. So again, we all have the capacity for these styles of thinking. The problem is when we use these styles of thinking too casually. And you gave the example that, of course, there are probably some therapists. Yes, indeed. There are also some therapists who are probably a little bit better examples than that, but still not particularly extraordinary, who, let's say, they'll get a hunch after they've gathered data. So they went deductive a bit and they gathered more facts, and then a little bit prematurely they had a hunch and instantly went inductive, probably a little too soon, and then started to ask leading questions. And here's where it gets problematic. If you ask a leading question, that can, especially in therapeutic situations, you can create a moving target. And this is one of the reasons why knowledge engineering is so extraordinary for unpacking stuck states, because we stay clean in our language. And this is another word that has meaning in NLP circles, is clean language. Well, clean language is another way of saying staying deductive. In other words, gathering information without prediction or leading. So I know clean language is an actual trademark term. I'm referring to clean language a little bit differently. I'm saying asking questions that do not involve leading longer than one might, so we can gather a wider set of possibilities and a better map of what's really going on for someone else. The moment someone said, let's say a client says to us, oh, I'd never want to do that. And if someone says, okay, so you'd never want to do that, that's staying clean. That's just reflecting what's been said.
Yeah.
What would you do is still a clean question, because you're asking what's inside their maps. But if someone comes back, as NLPers are wont to do if they're poorly trained, they'll say, never, you'd never do that. And now that's asking for a counterexample that may not be there.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy for people to shift from deductive to inductive without realizing it and knowing that they've just potentially created a moving target in what they're trying to build a map of and help a client fix. So anyway, I think what's critical there, and I think we've covered it, is this distinction between inductive and deductive, and why it is dangerous, sloppy, poor quality communication and coaching work to not be aware of when one shifts between deductive and inductive. So I think if your listeners can gain an appreciation of that and begin to improve the way in which they stay aware of their thinking patterns and tighten up which one they're using at what time and for what purpose, I think we'll have achieved something extraordinary.
Okay, so if we were to look into the future and what we might wish the field of NLP to become, or what could come from it, what do you wish for the field of NLP in the future?
Ooh. Well, ideally, I'd love the whipped cream providers of NLP to fall by the wayside in the marketplace. so that NLP can get back to producing real Jedi masters, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
Students need to get past their adulation of what's fancy and on stage, in other words, if the trainer is the one who's getting all the attention as opposed to the students, it's really about the students and it's not about the trainer.
Yeah.
Look at the only thing that matters, the results that they're able to achieve, the students are able to achieve post-training. Compare that to students coming out of other trainers' courses. This is the only thing that matters, is depth of results and skills transferred and length and depth of retention over time. How good the trainer looks, how well dressed they are, how much higher their stage is compared to where the students are standing or sitting.
Yeah, how tall their chair is.
Right, and this is evidence of wrong signals. So anyway, I'd love for the lesser known greats in NLP to have more exposure to younger students, or for younger students, folks like Eric Roby in the UK, Rex Sykes in the USA. In Australia, let's name Roger Diener and Marvin Oka. I mean, there's some well-known trainers there too. Chris and Jules Collingwood have done something extraordinary by getting, and they're in Sydney. They're associated with John Grinder.
Yeah.
They've gotten national accreditation for their courses. That isn't the direction I would go in, but I applaud their efforts and what they're aiming to achieve. So many more, not including those, again, excluding those who do short practitioner certification courses. Just to reiterate, I think that one criteria is perhaps one of the most important for determining who is a gifted contributor to the field and who's a dark stain on our history, a pollutant, if you will. Someone who sold out to benefit their pocket, let's say, at students' expense, while dragging the field down. Now, listen, I've heard the counter argument that, gosh, they're training useful skills during the few days that they're training. Why is that bad? Well, it's not that training useful skills is bad. That's valuable. But calling someone a practitioner after 5 days or less, when someone's doing the same thing over 10 plus days, or like James Tsoukalos for 28 days, it's ridiculous to say that a 5-day practitioner is a practitioner. They're not. It sells a false sense of equivalent competence and fills the field with incompetent practitioners. I'm really, I can't say enough about this. The length of a practitioner training isn't the only criteria that's important by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a very interesting and important criteria to consider. So,
yeah, and the other thing that's probably worth mentioning as well nowadays is that training time needs to be face-to-face as well, because I've seen quote-unquote online practitioner certification courses beginning to pop up, and it's my belief that you can't learn this skill, which is about people interacting with a computer screen versus interacting with actual live people.
Absolutely not. Online practitioner training is a heinous joke to those of us who know better. It really is. It's fine to gather information, and information gathering through books, CDs, tapes, even online videos. Valuable as educational components in a much larger training process. This is a full body sport. To really get NLP, it has to be sensory rich in person with a guide, a mentor, who can tune what you do. When you are using yourself as the sole criteria for whether you've performed a technique or a pattern appropriately, you are deeply impoverished and don't have the criteria to know how or why. This is a full body sport. Get yourself to a live training with wonderful mentors. It's that important.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So what are you doing with NLP right now? And I'll ask you afterwards where our listeners can find you as well. So what have you got coming up? What are you doing with NLP now?
Well, I've got two big projects right in front of me, not at the second, but in general right now. One of them is I'm finishing up an 8 CD set on something called Own the Interview. I'm doing an 8 CD set, or MP3s, of course, as well, on how to use NLP to completely ace any professional interview. And that's going to be out quite soon. The other thing I'm doing right now is I'm reworking knowledge engineering into KE 2.0, which is going to be an actual certification course on modeling and coaching. It's time, the material's evolved. Teaching KE over 3 days was a nice convenience, but really didn't get us to the kind of depth that people really needed to get truly gifted with knowledge engineering. So it's time. And so that's one of my next big projects. And my first certification course on KE 2.0 will be somewhere in the realm of 6 months away from now. So sometime during spring 2017. I'm sure I'll teach it somewhere in the US, somewhere in Australia, and somewhere in Europe.
Right, yes, because I don't know if I said this before. One of the differences between you and many NLP trainers is that you train all over the world.
Well, indeed, I do. Though I haven't been doing a lot of international travel since 2009 when the downturn happened. Things have obviously picked up since then, and it's time for me to get moving again. I've probably trained in at least 10 countries. I've trained in the UK at least 20 different times. That's 20 different visits with typically more than one course per visit. I've trained in Europe at least 10, 15 times, trained in Australia 9 times, I think, possibly with more than one course per visit. So yeah, Canada a bunch of times. I found no real restriction in my head, no limiting beliefs that separated me from running a course in Tampa versus running a course in London or Oxford or Edinburgh or Glasgow or Melbourne or Sydney. I just felt, well, why not? If I can run a course here, I can run a course there. And so I just hopped a flight and set things up, and the rest is history. I have to say it is an unbelievable privilege to be able to say that and to have learned from gifted minds like yours. I've had the opportunity to connect with people in multiple different cultures and gain a global sense of awareness that I never really had to that degree prior to becoming a trainer of NLP. I'm truly grateful for it. It's offered a different perspective on the world that I just have a lot of gratitude for. So.
Yeah, because people do think differently out there in different countries, different cultures. I've found this. I've been working in various bits of the Muslim world in the Middle East and Southeast Asia over the last few years, and it does enrich you. It does broaden your horizons.
Indeed it does, and it also teaches you what not to do. Like, never put 2 fingers up in the air while you're saying the word "to" in front of a British audience.
Definitely not. Well, depends which way around the fingers are.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And I did it the better way, but I still caused a couple of gasps. So that's relatively early on, and that's just one example of many, let's say, intercultural differences that one learns to appreciate sometimes the hard way.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find you? Where's your website?
Okay, website is my last name, which is altfeld.com. I'm sure you'll have a link there on your site somewhere.
I certainly will.
Probably, I'm going to mention a couple of options and opportunities that people might want to take advantage of, but probably the best way for someone to get to know me and for me to potentially get to know each of them a little bit is if they go to my site and look for the promo that's available on any page, and it says 2 free gifts sent by mail. I'm still one of the very few folks out there that actually sends out a promo package by mail. I don't send it to every country, but I will send it internationally to most Western countries. And it's not cheap for me to do so. I do it because a significant percentage of the people that receive that will become a customer. So I consider it an investment and an opportunity for me to share with each person who does this some material and some good materials for getting started. So there's a couple of gifts in that package that goes out. I don't do it in exchange for just an email address. I expect people to share with me some of their personal information. So people who prefer to stay anonymous, they don't get the package. Sorry. It's quite an investment for me to do that and follow through on that. So I'd like to get to know each person who's doing that. And if they prefer to stay anonymous, they can get on my email list as well, or as an alternative for just an email address. And there's another gift they get if they do that. Lately, I've been doing a lot of coaching and consulting, surprising amount, in private and corporate clients. I'm still doing a little bit of public training, and if they want to learn more about what I'm doing and join me in a course, I'd love it. I'd love to get to know them. Mostly focusing on business applications of NLP these days, like in public speaking, sales, and even the home study materials on interviewing coming up soon. All my certification courses nowadays are 10-day business NLP courses. I teach a business NLP practitioner course, for example. Many of the same skills that are taught in a standard course are taught in my business NLP prac, but I'm primarily focused on how these skills can best be used in business settings and professional settings. So here's an example. Kinesthetic anchoring, for one, is a skill that's inevitably more limited in business settings.
Yep.
But I typically use examples and stories, and when I'm constructing exercises, I'm intentionally using business settings as our context for application. So I'd love to hear from everybody, and why don't we extend an offer to everybody too? Just thanks for listening.
Please do, yeah.
Listeners, a special time-limited offer through my website, and I'm going to say that it'll work for 2 weeks after you publish this podcast, and they can get 20% off my 4-CD or MP3 set called Creating the Automatic Yes. This is a 4-CD set on something called emotional state chaining. So how to influence, not through pushy language patterns, but through emotional state transitions, how to move your listeners from less receptive to more receptive states. And they can get 20% off. And thanks for listening to this podcast for 2 full weeks after you publish the podcast. How's that? Let's call the coupon Practical NLP.
Okay, well, I think that just about wraps it up. We're going to put a link to the explanation of inductive and deductive reasoning.
Yep.
You've mentioned your courses, and I will I'll also put a link on the blog to where people can find those. I'm sure they can just get notified of that as soon as they're available, just from signing up to your newsletter at altfeld.com.
Very good.
So just remains for me to say thank you very much, Jonathan, for being my interviewee today. It's been a real privilege. And I guess at some point we'll probably have you back in the future, but we want to give many other NLP trainers a go as well, so it might not be for a couple of years.
I'd be happy to join you again. Thank you so much for hosting this, for doing this work, and I'm looking forward to listening to your future interviews as well.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Jonathan. Okay. Bye. See you soon. So there's our interview. You can find the show notes for this episode at nlppod.com, where you'll see a link to Jonathan's article setting out the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning in more detail. Also in the show notes, there's a link for you to get 20% off his excellent Creating the Automatic Yes audio program, with a choice of CD set or MP3 format. Just follow the link to Jonathan's product page and use the coupon code PRACTICALNLP on your order. This is a limited time offer, and that coupon code is valid up to 11 p.m. Eastern USA time on 10th of November 2016. That's it for this week's podcast. See you next time.